Here we're doing Seneca Village in Central Park. For many years, it was believed that this was the cornerstone to All Angels Church, one of 4 churches in Seneca Village.
Every day, millions stroll through Central Park, unaware they are walking over a town deliberately erased from history. Beneath the lawns lies Seneca Village, once New York City's largest community of black landowners before the land was seized to build the park. Buried for over 150 years, the village was rediscovered through groundbreaking radar technology, revealing homes, churches, and possible graves. These discoveries exposed a forgotten legacy of black prosperity and raised questions about what else remains hidden beneath the city. Seneca Village's hidden foundations. Beneath the manicured lawns of Central Park, something long thought lost began to re-emerge, not through excavation, but through the quiet hum of radar waves sent deep into the earth. This technology revealed stark, unmistakable shapes, straight lines, right angles, the sharp outlines of human-made foundations. These were no random anomalies. They matched the layout of a once thriving community known as Seneca Village. The discovery challenged the comfortable myth of the park as untouched nature, exposing a buried history hidden beneath the grass for over 150 years. Seneca Village had vanished physically and almost vanished from memory, erased by time and official narratives. The radar images pulled back the curtain, showing that beneath the green lawns lay the bones of churches, homes, and community spaces, frozen in quiet defiance of deliberate erasure. For researchers witnessing this, the site was shattering. History wasn't lost, but buried, waiting patiently to be acknowledged. Yet, what the radar revealed wasn't just relics of old buildings. It was a reminder of a community's resilience and the lengths taken to obscure its existence. The shape of that buried village unsettled those who had long accepted the park's surface as the whole story. Here was proof that a significant, life-filled neighborhood had thrived where the trees now stand, contradicting decades of omission and reshaping how the city's history should be told. But some findings went beyond the visible outlines of walls and streets, hinting at things no one fully knew how to say, like the possible presence of graves still resting underground. That silent mystery added a deeper, more somber layer to the discovery, a call to honor lives once lived there. This was not a typical archaeological dig where spades disturb soil. Instead, the technology allowed a kind of reverence, a way to see without uprooting, a necessity given the sensitivity and sacred nature of the ground beneath a public park. The delicate balance between revealing history and preserving the present intensified the significance of what the radar uncovered and started a conversation about memory, loss, and recognition. For years, Seneca Village existed only in archives, maps, and the fading memories of descendants. The radar's images shattered the invisibility imposed by history, forcing a reckoning with a community that real estate and power had attempted to wipe away. This technology became a lens not only on the past, but on the present's failure to fully honor it. The discovery also exposed a broader question. How many other stories have been buried, intentionally or not, beneath the surfaces of modern cities, hidden testaments to lives forgotten but never truly gone? Seneca Village became a powerful symbol of that principle. Its foundations beneath Central Park demand acknowledgement and respect far beyond their physical contours. Yet, the story beneath those lawns was just beginning to unfold. The radar had drawn the shape of a vanished world, but understanding the people who built and lived in Seneca Village would require tracing its roots, its achievements, and the community's unique place in history. This bridge from the buried past to the lived experience of Seneca Village was vital, because to truly honor the village, its story could not remain just lines on a screen. It had to be given life again through the voices and struggles of those who called it home. And that history begins with a community defined not by absence, but by its persistent presence and quiet strength against the odds. Even as radar pulses traced hidden walls, the true story lived in the daily lives and dreams of Seneca Village's residents, stories waiting to be heard. Life in Seneca Village. Seneca Village was far more than a collection of foundations. It was a vibrant, multi-ethnic community where Black landowners found a rare foothold in 19th-century New York City. Around 300 people lived there by the 1850s, with roughly two-thirds identifying as Black, and the remainder including Irish and German immigrants. This mix of people shared streets, churches, and schools in a way almost unheard of during an era marked by stark racial segregation and discrimination. The village boasted 3 churches and its own school, institutions that anchored the community's spiritual life and educational aspirations. Families tended gardens and kept livestock, living lives that were productive, purposeful, and invested in the future. Some homes rose 3 stories tall, stone and wood built to last, signaling the residents' commitment to permanence and pride in their achievements. This was a neighborhood defined not by poverty or impermanence, but by ownership, faith, and a steadfast belief in belonging. These residents were not casual settlers or transients. They were landowners, taxpayers, and community builders. Through their hard work, they created a safe haven amid a city that largely restricted opportunity for Black New Yorkers. The story of Seneca Village must be measured against the stark realities of its time. Slavery in New York State was legal until 1827, and free Black people faced severe restrictions on housing, work, and political rights. Most were crowded into destitute neighborhoods like the notorious 5 Point slum. Seneca Village offered an escape from these confines, a place where dignity and relative self-determination flourished. Yet the community's existence itself was a quiet act of resistance. Each home purchased, each church built, was a declaration signaling, "We are here, we belong, and we are not going anywhere." These were people laying down roots amid systemic barriers designed to keep them constrained and marginalized. The success of Seneca Village was remarkable, especially considering that by 1855, fewer than 100 Black men in New York City owned enough property to qualify to vote. Of those, roughly 10 lived in this small village, creating a rare concentration of Black political influence in one community. At a time when discriminatory laws and widespread racism limited opportunities, property ownership provided far more than financial security. It offered stability, independence, and a meaningful voice in civic life, allowing residents to shape their futures despite the barriers they faced. Life here was filled with ordinary moments charged with extraordinary meaning. Children learning to read and write, families worshiping in their own churches, neighbors sharing in livelihoods and celebrations. These were everyday victories carving out space in a city and a country still grappling with freedom and inequality. The village's stories are made vivid by residents like the Wilson family, whose deep roots and solid homes challenged the reductive labels once used to describe Seneca Village. Their lives personify the aspirations of a community denied recognition for far too long. Understanding how people lived in Seneca Village is essential to grasping the magnitude of what was lost and buried beneath the park, an erasure extending beyond land to the erasure of identity and history. Seneca Village existed as proof that Black prosperity and community building were not anomalies, but bold realities in America's past, deliberately obscured from view. From the buildings and streets, the story stretches into the vital human fabric that gave Seneca Village life, hope, and meaning. Land ownership and political power. In Seneca Village, land was more than dirt and buildings. It was power, freedom, and a ticket to citizenship rights fiercely fought for across the United States. Black men in New York City needed to own at least $250 in real estate to qualify to vote, a financial threshold unreachable for most. Properties in Seneca Village offered a rare path to such economic and political agency. By the mid-1800s, about 1 in 10 Black voters in New York City lived right here in that small neighborhood. This concentration made Seneca Village the city's largest hub of Black political power, a stark contrast to the restrictive world most free Black residents faced in crowded downtown slums. Here, property ownership translated directly into a voice in governance and community decisions. This accumulation of property was no accident, but the result of collective strategy and determination. Residents like Andrew Williams and Epiphany Davis actively purchased land on terms deemed undesirable by others, turning marginalized terrain into a prosperous, self-sustaining community. Their deeds and titles were firm statements of belonging in a society that often denied Black people both land and rights. Equally important, these landowners established institutions, churches, schools that reinforced community bonds and helped protect property rights. The African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, for example, was a spiritual and social anchor, with trustees who owned significant parcels of land, linking religious life directly with political empowerment. The connection between land and the franchise was fundamental. Losing property in Seneca Village meant losing voting rights. This added an especially cruel dimension when the city, under eminent domain, seized lands to make way for Central Park. Displacement was not only economic destruction, but political disenfranchisement, affecting the residents and generations to come.
Before the park was built, town that was one of the first integrated communities in New York City history, one of the first predominantly Black communities in New York City history, and it was completely erased from history to build Central Park.
The city's seizure of Seneca Village served as a direct attack on Black political power, undermining a rare stronghold of autonomy within an urban environment otherwise riddled with segregation and discrimination. The legal tools used, like eminent domain, masked this reality under the guise of public good, but the consequences were deeply personal and political. This history reframes Seneca Village as more than a neighborhood. It was a beacon of Black self-determination and political engagement during a critical period in American history. Its destruction echoes the ongoing struggle for equity and voting rights faced by marginalized communities. So when we think of Seneca Village, it is essential to remember that those lots bought and homes built were not only foundations of houses, but foundations of political voice and rights. Each deed was a stake in the future, each family a testimony to resilience. The story of the village's land ownership challenges us to recognize how land and political power have been intertwined throughout history, and how their loss affects communities far beyond mere geography. The legacy of Seneca Village is a reminder that the fight for property was and remains a fight for justice itself. The Wilson family's story. The story of Seneca Village becomes deeply personal when we look at families like the Wilsons, whose lives were woven into the fabric of this thriving community. William Godfrey Wilson, the sexton of All Angels Episcopal Church, was a man who cared deeply for his neighborhood. Together with his wife Charlotte, likely a lifelong resident, they raised 9 children in a solid 3-story home with a stone foundation and sturdy brick chimney, an enduring symbol of their commitment to permanence and security. Their home was more than shelter. It was a sanctuary where values were passed down, including the importance of education, faith, and community. Every one of their children attended school, learning to read and write at a time when such opportunities were radical and rare for Black Americans. This family represented a powerful statement of hope and resilience amidst a society that had long denied people like them basic rights and recognition. Imagine an ordinary evening in that house, wood smoke curling from the chimney, lamplight glowing softly through windows, laughter of children echoing through rooms carefully built with pride and hard labor. This wasn't a makeshift dwelling or a transient camp. It was a home built to last, echoing with the ordinary, yet extraordinary, rhythms of daily life. Charlotte's own mother had owned land in Seneca Village, rooting the Wilsons deeply in this place for generations. Their lives connected past, present, and future, firmly planted against a backdrop of systemic challenges. Theirs was a family tied to the soil, to faith, and to community consciousness. The Wilson family's experience stands in stark contrast to the distorted narratives that would later justify their displacement. They were upstanding citizens, investing in education and land ownership, embodying the very ideals the American dream promised, but rarely delivered to Black Americans at the time. Their story personalizes the broader history of Seneca Village, reminding us that behind every home destroyed was a family, with hopes and struggles and a deep sense of belonging. It transforms abstract erasure into real human loss. William and Charlotte's house once stood where joggers now stretch their legs and children fly kites, yet few know the lives beneath that grass. It is a humbling reminder that the stories of families like the Wilsons have long been buried beneath public spaces, waiting to be reclaimed. Understanding these personal stories enriches our grasp of Seneca Village's true significance. More than a location on a map, it was a home to generations seeking dignity and justice. Through the Wilsons, the village's legacy gains a vivid, tangible presence beyond archaeological finds. Their lived experience presses upon us the urgency to remember fully not only where these communities stood, but who they truly were. The tale of the Wilson family draws us closer into the heart of Seneca Village, where lives were nurtured and futures built until everything changed. The city's seizure and displacement. By the 1850s, New York City was expanding rapidly, and a grand vision emerged among its powerful elites: a sprawling Central Park to rival London and Paris. Stretching over 700 acres through the heart of Manhattan, the chosen site included the vibrant community of Seneca Village. For the city, the creation of the park was a public good. For the village's residents, it was a looming threat to everything they had built. To take the land, the city invoked eminent domain, the legal authority to seize private property for public use with compensation. On paper, this seemed fair, but the reality was far more brutal. Residents of Seneca Village fought back, submitting petitions demanding fair payment for homes, churches, and schools constructed over decades. Still, the offers undervalued their property, often paying only pennies on the dollar. This loss held a cruel extra weight for Black landowners. Property ownership was not just economic security, but political power. In New York, Black men had to own at least $250 in real estate to vote, and losing their homes meant losing their voices. The city's seizure was not only a destruction of a community, but a calculated blow against Black political agency. Newspapers played a critical role in easing this seizure. They portrayed Seneca Village as a disorderly shantytown, calling residents squatters and nuisances. This smear campaign dehumanized a stable, thriving neighborhood, creating public support for its removal. The press echoed a familiar pattern used repeatedly against Black communities: demonize to dispossess. Despite fierce resistance, by the end of 1857, the village was gone. Around 1,600 people were displaced from the entire area designated for the park. Homes were torn down, churches dismantled board by board, and the village school was erased. The gardens and familiar streets became unrecognizable ground beneath manicured lawns. Families like the Wilsons watched their lives reduced to rubble, their homes turned to stone piles, their roots severed in a single season. Many were forced back into cramped, hostile downtown neighborhoods they had once escaped, trading ownership and safety for overcrowded rentals and marginalization. The physical erasure extended into memory as well. For over 100 years, New Yorkers remained largely unaware that beneath the park lay the foundations of a flourishing Black community. The story of Seneca Village was almost entirely forgotten, surviving only in a handful of records and the memories of descendants too seldom heard. This disappearance was not accidental, but the result of intentional policies and social forces designed to remove Black presence from valuable urban spaces. The park's serene greenery hides a past marked by displacement and loss rooted in racial and political power struggles. The city's seizure of Seneca Village encapsulates how urban development was often a guise for dispossession, teaching us how greed, prejudice, and public good narratives thwarted Black progress and community stability. The removal of Seneca Village breathed new life into Central Park, but came at the cost of silenced families and a lost chapter in the city's story. Media and public perception. When Seneca Village faced eviction, the battle was not only fought in courtrooms, but also in the pages of newspapers. The press played a decisive role in shaping public opinion, often portraying the village as a dangerous, disorderly settlement unworthy of preservation. Residents were labeled squatters and vagabonds, dismissed as obstacles to progress rather than citizens with rights, property, and community ties. This deliberate mischaracterization dehumanized a neighborhood built on land ownership, faith, and resilience, recasting it as a nuisance to justify its removal. These portrayals followed a familiar and deeply troubling pattern used repeatedly against Black communities across American history. By framing Seneca Village as blighted and chaotic, the media softened public resistance to its destruction. What existed in reality, homes, churches, schools, and families, was replaced with distorted imagery designed to provoke fear and indifference. The narrative did not merely misrepresent the village, it erased its humanity, making displacement appear both necessary and inevitable. Newspaper accounts went further, describing residents as simple-minded individuals who resisted relocation out of ignorance rather than rightful concern. Such language infantilized the community and undermined their legitimacy in the eyes of the broader public. It suggested that those who lived there lacked the capacity to understand their own interests, masking the truth that they were being forcibly removed from land they legally owned. This rhetoric was not harmless. It reinforced the city's legal and political efforts to seize the land, creating a moral justification for dispossession. The impact of this coordinated narrative was profound. As public support for Central Park's creation grew, empathy for the people of Seneca Village diminished. By the time the final evictions were carried out in 1857, the village had been largely erased, not only from the landscape but from public consciousness. The story told to the public no longer included the voices of those displaced. Instead, it reflected a version of events that favored progress over justice. This rewriting of history was not unique. Labeling thriving black neighborhoods as slums or undesirable spaces became a recurring tactic, paving the way for their destruction. Whether for parks, highways, or urban development projects, such narratives were repeatedly used to justify displacement. Seneca Village stands as one of the earliest and clearest examples of this pattern, a blueprint that would be replicated in countless other communities. The press's role in this process highlights how power extends beyond physical land into the realm of storytelling. Control over narrative can determine whose experiences are validated and whose are erased. In the case of Seneca Village, the vilification of its residents helped sustain a social order that marginalized black success and denied their claims to belonging. Yet the story does not end with erasure. Descendants, historians, and advocates have worked tirelessly to recover and restore the truth of Seneca Village. Through research, public history projects, and renewed attention, they have challenged decades of silence and distortion. Their efforts remind us that history is not fixed. It can be revisited, corrected, and reclaimed. Recognizing the media's role in this injustice urges us to question dominant narratives, examine sources critically, and seek out voices that were excluded. It calls on us to remember not only what was lost, but also how it was hidden. Beneath the beauty of Central Park lies a past shaped as much by words as by actions, a lasting reminder of the power of narrative to influence justice, memory, and truth. The silence and distortion surrounding Seneca Village set the stage for discoveries that challenged not only the past, but how it is remembered today. Archaeology and sensitive discoveries.
This is an archaeological project that is located in what is Central Park today, but at the time that we're looking at, was a community of African Americans and Irish immigrants.
The quest to uncover Seneca Village required navigating delicate ethical and logistical challenges. Central Park is one of the world's most protected and heavily visited green spaces, an iconic landscape where millions gather each year. Because of this, archaeologists could not simply excavate freely in search of lost history. Any investigation had to preserve the park's integrity while still honoring the past beneath it. To achieve this balance, researchers turned to ground-penetrating radar, a non-invasive technology capable of revealing what lies underground without disturbing the surface. This method proved transformative. Beneath the park's lawns, radar scans revealed the faint outlines of foundation walls, property boundaries, and building footprints, physical traces of homes and structures that once formed a thriving community. More strikingly, the scans also indicated shapes consistent with burial sites near former church grounds. Historical records had long confirmed the existence of cemeteries in Seneca Village, but the radar suggested that more graves may remain than previously documented, silently preserved beneath the landscape. The possibility of undisturbed human remains introduced profound ethical and cultural considerations. Excavating such areas is not merely a scientific decision, but a moral one. It requires respect for those who were buried there and sensitivity to the wishes of their descendants. Ground-penetrating radar cannot confirm human remains with certainty. It can only highlight anomalies consistent with graves. Verification would require excavation. Yet digging in such a historically and culturally sensitive site is restricted by preservation laws and guided by community values that prioritize dignity over discovery. This uncertainty places researchers and city officials in a complex position. On one hand, there is a responsibility to uncover and acknowledge hidden history. On the other, there is an obligation to protect what may be sacred ground. For the people of Seneca Village, whose lives were once overlooked and displaced, this unresolved tension carries deep meaning. It reflects a history not only erased from memory but physically buried beneath everyday life, where visitors walk, rest, and gather without awareness of what lies below. In 2011, after years of advocacy and negotiation, a limited and carefully controlled excavation was approved. Archaeologists focused on small, designated areas, including the foundation of William Godfrey Wilson's home, the village sexton. Strict protocols governed every step of the process. Soil was removed cautiously, excavation sites were restored daily, and disruption to the surrounding environment was kept to an absolute minimum. Despite these constraints, the findings were powerful. Researchers uncovered personal artifacts, such as a bone toothbrush handle, fragments of a teapot, an iron kettle, and the leather sole of a child's shoe, preserved for over 150 years.
They also found other objects like a comb, a smoking pipe, roasting pan, and part of a toothbrush that probably didn't belong to poor people.
These objects offered an intimate glimpse into daily life, simple items that speak to routines, care, and family connections. The child's shoe, in particular, stands as a poignant reminder of lives interrupted and futures that were never realized. Archaeology at Seneca Village is not solely about uncovering structures, but about restoring humanity to those who lived there. Each artifact challenges the silence imposed by history, bringing forward stories of resilience and community. Beneath the park's beauty lies a past marked by displacement, yet also by strength, recognizing that history ensures that Seneca Village is no longer forgotten, but remembered with the dignity it deserves. What lies beneath Central Park is more than bricks and bones. It is the proof of a community's endurance and a challenge to how history chooses what to preserve. The broader pattern of erasure. Seneca Village was not an isolated incident. Its story reflects a recurring pattern of Black communities being destroyed and erased across the United States. Over the last century and more, communities that thrived against the odds have faced violent displacement, dispossession, and deliberate neglect. These neighborhoods were not accidental settlements. They were built through determination, land ownership, entrepreneurship, and strong social bonds. Yet, time and again, they were uprooted in the name of progress, public works, or so-called urban renewal, leaving behind little trace of the lives that once flourished there. Some examples are widely known, such as Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was burned to the ground in 1921, destroying one of the most prosperous Black economic centers in the country. Africatown in Alabama, founded by survivors of the last known slave ship to reach the United States, endured decades of environmental harm as industry encroached upon it. In California, Bruce's Beach, a successful Black-owned seaside resort, was seized by the government through eminent domain and only recently returned to the descendants of its original owners. Each of these stories echoes the fate of Seneca Village, communities built with hope and resilience, only to be criminalized, displaced, and largely erased from public memory. Beyond these high-profile cases are countless lesser-known neighborhoods that disappeared under highways, parks, and municipal developments throughout the 20th century. While labeled as urban renewal, many of these projects resulted in the systematic destruction of Black neighborhoods. Families who had followed the rules, purchasing land, building homes, and forming communities, saw their lives dismantled, their properties taken, and their histories paved over in the process. In many instances, the narrative surrounding these communities was deliberately distorted. Residents were portrayed as squatters, their neighborhoods described as blighted or dangerous, creating a convenient justification for forced removal. This framing not only enabled displacement, but also obscured the truth, allowing the broader public to overlook the injustice. Over time, this pattern of erasure diminished recognition of Black contributions to urban development, culture, and economic life. Seneca Village stands as one of the earliest examples of this destructive cycle, but it was far from the last. The same strategies, legal mechanisms like eminent domain, public discrediting, and selective storytelling have repeatedly denied Black families access to land, stability, and generational wealth. Recognizing this pattern is essential to understanding the structural inequalities that continue to shape American cities today. What lies beneath Central Park is more than a lost settlement. It is a symbol of resilience and resistance. Archaeological discoveries and modern research have brought fragments of that hidden past back into view, challenging long-standing narratives of absence. They compel us to consider how history is remembered and how easily it can be forgotten. Remembering Seneca Village, alongside similar stories across the nation, forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about race, power, and progress. It highlights how cities were shaped not only by growth, but by deliberate decisions to remove communities of color. These histories remind us that progress often came at a profound human cost. Acknowledging this past creates space for reflection, accountability, and healing. It invites descendants, historians, and communities to reclaim suppressed stories and consider meaningful ways to honor what was lost. The legacy of Seneca Village ultimately serves as both a warning and a call to ensure that future progress does not come at the expense of erasure, and that the voices of displaced communities are finally recognized and remembered. Seneca Village was a thriving Black community erased to make way for Central Park, but it never truly disappeared. Radar and archaeology uncovered its hidden foundations, forcing us to confront a pattern of displacement repeated across America. Remembering these stories matters. If you value uncovering history left out of textbooks and want to learn more, like this video and subscribe for more untold stories.